let me ask you guys a question. What does the Star Wars franchise, Alien franchise, and Terminator franchise have in common? Aside from all of them being sci-fi. Don't know? Well, let's put up a diagram that shows the Rotten Tomato scores of each entry from each franchise. Now tell me, what do you see here? Well, clearly, for each of these three franchises, there seems to be somewhat of a drop in quality after the very first few entries. While the first ones in each are widely beloved classics, the later entries seem to have never quite been able to live up to them as worthy follow-ups. It's obviously not that black and white, some of them do seem to have been mostly well received, but I think most fans of these respective franchises consider them to have mostly fallen off after their initial installments. I'm not saying what I personally think of them, I'm only saying what I think is the general consensus of them. And that, I think, is the general consensus. Now here's my second question. What is another franchise that people could argue share this same fate? Well, there are tons of them, but many could argue probably Predator. Most people love the original one from the 80s, but the later ones, not as much. I mean, 2022's Prey was surprisingly solid, but for a lot of people, the later entries are from divisive at best to outright bad at worst. However, there is another Predator entry that has come out very recently, like literally early this summer, and yet nobody is talking about it. Like, there is very little fuss surrounding this movie. And like, that does make a little bit of sense since I don't think this movie had that huge of a marketing behind it. And also it is a small straight to streaming film that can be easily missed amongst the huge library of streaming movies. But honestly, it's kind of tragic that this movie isn't getting enough recognition because let me tell you, this new entry in the Predator franchise wasn't just good. It wasn't just great, it was freaking fantastic! When I first saw the trailer for this movie, it had me pretty interested, taking the same idea that Prey did, in which we see a predator encounter happening in an older historical period, but expanding on that idea by giving us an anthology of 3 separate stories of predator encounters in 3 separate time periods. With the first story, called The Shield, taking place in the Viking Age, the second story, The Sword, is set in feudal Japan, and the third story, The Bullet, is set in the World War II era. Pretty cool idea for this franchise, honestly. But my gosh, I did not expect it to be this good. It's a tremendously well executed animated action film with precise pacing, surprisingly good storytelling, riveting action scenes, and utilizes the very genre of anthology itself to its benefit in an honestly clever way. If you think that Predator is at a low point in its life, just like those other franchises we talked about, then fear no more, my friend, because I present to you this underrated, overlooked, yet beautiful gem of a movie that not only breathes new life into this declining franchise, not only works as its own individual movie, but should honestly give you hope that there might in fact be a bright and exciting future for your favorite extraterrestrial hunter. There's quite a bit to talk about and even learn from as filmmakers regarding this movie and the stuff it accomplishes, but unfortunately, in order to talk about them, I am gonna have to get into spoilers. So if you don't want to see them, go watch the movie immediately, okay? It's a Hulu original, so you can easily watch it there, which also means that it's on Disney Plus, which is just kind of outrageous. But go ahead, watch it, give it the support it deserves, then come back to this video. Now, if you've already seen it or just don't care about spoilers, well then, either way, welcome to my review. Anyways, equip your gear, turn on your cloaking device, and let's go hunting. This is my review of Predator: Killer of Killers. Okay, let's start by first talking about the most obvious aspect that this movie gets so right: the action scenes. They are so cool. One reason why is thanks to the choreography. As an example, let's see the very first battle scene in the whole movie. Just look at the choreography from the shield. There is so much intricate movement happening so quickly that you can miss things if you're not paying attention, which forces you to pay attention and just keeps you captivated and makes you not want to look away. Same thing with this fight scene from the sword. As this stealthy Ronin tries to stop these guards from sounding the bell, look at all of the split-second reflexes and moves he does just to prevent them from doing that. Something else that the action does so well is utilizing the environment around for the characters' advantage, like using this samurai armor as a shield or dropping these monuments onto these enemies. But the environment also gets used to their disadvantage, like how this frozen river almost drowns this character, or how being in mid-air obviously makes movement extremely limited and dangerous due to the risk of falling. Using the environment to their benefit or detriment is so great because it fully takes advantage of the setting. There is so much creative potential to be had in regards to the set pieces and fight scenes because of the setting. So many different moves and strategies, techniques and weapons to be had, and the film wastes zero opportunity in that, giving us some absolutely creative and imaginative moments of action that delivers in all their potential. But the last thing I want to mention that this movie does to elevate the action is the use of setup and payoff. For example, in The Sword, the Predator here uses these tiny bombs, and later in the final battle of this story, we see this bomb laid on the ground in this very quick shot. That's the setup. And then, after the fight continues for another 34 seconds, we see the Predator launch this chain claw onto our protagonist, making us think that he has the upper hand and winning. But then, to our absolute surprise, as the protagonist removes the claw and sends it back to sender, we see that he has placed the bomb that was on the ground in the claw, leading it to explode on the Predator. That is so cool, and that was the payoff. Moments like this are so awesome because they're so rewarding. They feel like problem-solving victories, with the characters using what was already established in a way that benefits them, but in a way that is unexpected, yet still makes absolute sense. And this isn't the only example of that. There are plenty of these kinds of moments throughout the film. But yeah, I would say that these three are the main reasons why the action here is so amazing. Great choreography, great use of environments, and great use of setup and payoff. Plus, the sound effects are also great, and you can really feel the impact of each bloody blow. Now, if you ask me which of the three stories has the best action, my answer would be easily The Bullet. Sure, it kind of does away with the choreography thing since this one is about dogfights instead of martial arts, but that doesn't matter, it still retains the environment and setup and payoff thing. And the battles here are so amazing, it kind of makes me wish that Top Gun Maverick had dogfights like these. They are so hype, so riveting, and just so creative with the things that go down. That final move that takes down the Predator ship? Mwah! Chef's kiss. So good. Are the things that happen unrealistic? Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know anything about fighter jets or dogfighting, but according to what I've heard from some, these moments push the limits of what's possible in these scenarios. Now, if that's true, do I care? Heck freaking no! These moments are way too cool to be worrying about that, especially when you know nothing about this stuff. I think this movie has convinced me enough to have a certain suspension of disbelief. Now, while the bullet had the best action, the sword had the best visual storytelling. There is barely any dialogue in this story. Almost everything that happens in both the external plot and internal character work is all communicated to us through the visuals and even through the action. If you know me, you know that I am a sucker for that stuff, and the sword gave me exactly that. I would honestly love to make a video talking about and breaking down this particular story and all of its awesome visual details and artistic choices. Unfortunately, I don't think that would be very algorithmically friendly, at least not for now, but who knows, maybe someday in the future if my channel grows big enough. Anyways, yeah, the action scenes, phenomenal. Truly, truly great. What else does this movie have to offer? I'll tell you what else. And that is the fact that this movie is an anthology to begin with. Now, what I assume you think I mean by this is just how great it is that we have an awesome idea like this already executed. The idea of an anthology film of predator encounters in different time periods. And that's true. Like I already said, this is a very cool idea for a Predator film, and it's great that we're seeing it on screen. However, this movie does more with its role as an anthology in a way that I think is kind of brilliant. You see, after the end of The Shield, we out of nowhere see the story's main character, Ursa, sitting in a dark, mysterious room with this weird collar on her neck, only to then zoom into this other guy with his back turned. Who is this guy? What is this place? What's she doing here? We start wondering. Then we transition to the next story, The Sword, and when that story ends, we see its main character, Kenji, also sitting in that same room with Ursa, and with the same collar, making us realize that he was that person who had his back turned. Then we zoom out to this guy, which only makes us assume that he must be the main character from the next story. And then we transition to that next story, The Bullet. And once that story is done, we don't immediately return to that room. But something else happens that I'll tell you in a bit. These tiny moments that happen at the end of the first two stories leave us wondering what is going on here. We start assuming that there's something bigger connecting these stories together, but we don't know what and how. And there is in fact a bigger connection. Because you see, unlike what I've been making it seem so far in this video, this movie does not have 3 stories. It actually has 4, the fourth one of which does not have a specific name. Once The Bullet is over, that's when this 4th story begins, as the main character of The Bullet, Torres, gets abducted by a predator ship, gets put into cryosleep for who knows how long, and then joins the other main characters, which we realize have also been abducted. After this moment, we then realize why they were brought here. Because these predators forcibly put them in a gladiator-esque death game where they will have to kill each other, and the winner then must fight this predator leader. But if they refuse to fight, the collars on their necks will explode. When I saw this ultimate revelation, it legit surprised me. I did not expect these 3 stories to come together at the end in this way, and it was so cool. I love it not just because it's a very cool idea, but also because it was just plain unexpected. Now, I've heard some people who have seen this film complain about this, saying that it's contradictory to what predators do, that predators are an honor-based culture who desire fair fights, and they show respect to those who are skillful and can even spare those who impress them enough. And so putting victims who have proven their skill in an unfair match where they will surely lose is just out of character for them. And my objection to that argument is, I don't think these predators are representative of all predators. I think that this is just a different clan with its own culture and its own values. Besides, we've already seen a scenario similar to this in 2010's Predators, where these characters are also kidnapped and put in a sort of death game, and the predators in that film are so depraved that they even attack their own kind from other groups. And I think that that's the same scenario in this movie. A completely different predator clan whose culture and values are much crueler and less honorable than others. Who knows, maybe they're even the exact same clan from that 2010 entry. So yeah, I don't think that this is necessarily a contradiction. But anyways, returning to the previous topic, the reason why I said that this movie being an anthology is something else that it has to offer is because of this fourth story. It being an anthology leads you to believe that all this movie is going to do is just tell you 3 stories that are going to be entertaining and you're gonna have fun with them, but they really don't have all that much of a connection and really not much else is gonna be done. Just 3 stories individually and that's it, you're done, movie over. And so, when the rug is pulled from under you and you realize that there was more of an overarching story to all of this all along, it kind of catches you off guard and can make you even more interested in the movie because now you know that there's more to it than you initially thought going in. Something that this made me realize is that anthologies, as underused of a narrative structure as they are, honestly have more potential of being unpredictable than a standard single story narrative. Because you can play around a lot more with your audience's expectations, considering how much exploration, experimentation, and variety that anthologies encourage. And that's what this movie does as an anthology, surprising you with the fact that there's more of an overarching story to all of this than you thought, all because you expected it to be nothing more than just a few simple individual stories and that's it. With all of that said though, if the fourth story just stopped at that, if it was just unexpected and surprising as that, but it didn't really add anything meaningful to the movie as a whole, then it ultimately would not have mattered too much. Fortunately, there is still even more to this than just that. Which leads us to my last point of why this movie works so well, the overarching story itself. So to get my point of this, I'm going to have to quickly summarize the first 2 stories. The Shield begins with Ursa leading a Viking clan to go on a vengeful mission to kill the leader of another tribe who killed her father. Well, sort of. Ursa's son, Anders, tags along and tries to do his best for the mission and his mother, but seems to be a little more reluctant with getting involved in all of this unnecessary violence. After they successfully take down the leader, that's when the Predator crashes the party, and we see them battle against their new and bigger enemy. Ursa wins, but in all the wreckage, Anders unfortunately doesn't make it. And that's the end of that story. Then we transition to the sword. This one begins with 2 brothers playing together, but this samurai, who I assume is their father, commands them to sword fight each other and the winner will become his successor. One of the brothers, Kenji, refuses to fight, but the other brother, Kiyoshi, reluctantly does. Kiyoshi wins the duel, wounding Kenji's face, and gets rewarded for it, right before Kenji runs away heartbroken. Years later, Kenji sneaks into his brother's palace to get revenge, and once meeting him again, they duel once more, with Kenji this time winning, really only wanting to just wound him like Kiyoshi did back then. But then Kiyoshi falls from a balcony. Afterwards, the Predator interrupts the moment and begins chasing down Kenji, leading him to meet with Kiyoshi again down by a river. The Predator appears to them, and the two brothers join forces to kill it, which they do. They sit by each other and reconcile, all before Kiyoshi ultimately dies from a wound inflicted by the Predator in an earlier part. And that's the end of that story. Now, I'm not gonna summarize the bullet just yet for a reason I'll explain later. So okay, those are the first two stories. Where am I going with this? Well, because of the context that we received for these characters in their respective stories, we will now see them develop and progress together in ways that make complete sense in this final story. Ursa ends her story as a vengeful, violent person who only knows how to resolve things through violence, and so she plays along with the death game she was put in just to save her own life. Kenji, on the other hand, because of his experience in his story, prefers not to fight, and instead wants them to work together to survive, considering the outcome of doing that in his experience. And Taurus also desires that approach as well, especially since he plans to fly this Predator ship to escape with them. This is kind of brilliant. Taking these different characters whose belief systems completely contrast each other because of their different experiences and leads to engaging character conflict. As the fourth story progresses, we then see Ursa look at Taurus in his pacifism, which ends up reminding her of her son, and this ultimately changes her mind, deciding to take their approach and work with them to escape. And not only that, but later on, in a moment where the Predators almost capture the characters while on the ship, she ends up making a heroic sacrifice, breaking the machine that caught them, but resulting in her staying behind. However, what does she say before making this sacrifice?
Mother, what are you doing?
That is awesome. This one line shows how much she's grown. Before, all she wanted was revenge, but knowing how that has ultimately caused her more harm, like the death of her son, now she is no longer the same bloodthirsty, vengeful person anymore. And this is a character change that makes even more sense thanks to Kenji's story, which also showed the journey of someone going from vengeful to pacifistic, making Ursa's journey feel even more logical and even poetic. All of this is just great. It is just so well written and structured. I just think it's so clever how this anthology takes these unique characters with these unique experiences, and then by the end, puts them in a challenging situation together where they must come to grips with what they have learned from their experiences, confront those who think differently because of their experiences, and potentially change as people because of what they learn from the others. Doing this just makes the whole film feel so complete. It makes the movie go from feeling like a bunch of relatively unrelated little mini stories to feeling like a whole single story that always had a bigger purpose from the beginning. And there's just something so satisfying about that. Now, with that said, is it done perfectly? Not really. And this does lead me to one flaw that I do have with the movie, but it also leads me to finally talking about the bullet. Even though The Bullet is very entertaining on its own and has arguably the best action out of all the stories, like I've already said, one problem that it does have is that it doesn't feel quite as essential to the fourth story like the other ones were. And the reason why is because Taurus's character arc doesn't really have anything to do with any of the other characters' journeys. While Ursa's and Kenji's journeys contrast with each other perfectly because one faces the consequences of revenge and the other learns to oppose revenge, Taurus's journey is just about learning to problem solve when all you have is yourself. What real meaningful connection does that have with the other characters and their respective journeys? None, really. Now, Taurus being in that final story does still make sense, since the characters do need a tech-savvy person, an aviator like him, to figure out the Predator technology and pilot that ship for their escape. But in terms of having internal thematic significance, Taurus doesn't really bring all that much, aside from just being also mostly pacifistic like Kenji. It would have been better if Taurus's journey also had to do with the themes of revenge or violence like the other stories were. Doing that would have probably made his character more thematically important for the fourth story. I would still say that he's a fine character and is also entertaining for having a more comedic personality unlike the others, but they could have still done more with his character. Despite that, however, I still stand by my points that I just love how, even though this is an anthology, it's brought all of these stories together in a meaningful way that made it all feel more like a single, complete, overarching story. I just thought that was really cool. Also, I just want to mention, while I don't think that this was intentional from the writer or director, I also found this final story to be kind of inspiring in a specific way. Because here you have three people who all come from completely different cultures, completely different civilizations, and even time periods, and as you can see in the film, can't even understand each other because of the obvious language barrier. And yet, despite that, somehow they still find a way to connect with each other and unite in order to fight a greater evil and survive together. Basically giving the message that no matter how different we may be from one another, there will always be something universal about us that's strong enough to unite us. I just found that to be pretty cool and kind of inspiring to see that happen with these characters in this movie. Again, it most likely was not intentional, but what can I say? I just felt that watching it. Now, one more great thing about this movie that I gotta mention that is kind of the cherry on top, the pacing is practically pitch perfect. It wastes zero of your time. Even though so much happens, it's literally 4 stories in one movie, it still somehow manages to have the shortest runtime out of all Predator movies, only being an hour and 25 minutes long. It gets to the point, delivers in what it promises, very satisfyingly so, and moves on. No dragging whatsoever. And that, my friend, is Predator Killer of Killers for you. Not only a slightly better entry in this declining franchise, no, a genuinely amazing movie. One that, out of nowhere, just arrived crashing into the party and showed everyone how to be a real hunter again. Again, if you're a Predator fan who has been feeling bad about how this franchise has been turning out recently within the past few decades, well, this movie should ignite a passionate flame inside you again and make you excitedly ready to see what lies beyond the horizon in this galactic hunting ground. And you should get excited, especially considering that one post-credit scene, which, if you're a Predator fan, should make you feel the same way Shadow's reveal made Sonic fans feel. I'm just gonna leave it at that. You will see what I mean. But yeah, if you guys haven't seen it yet, well, first of all, shame on you for allowing yourself to get spoiled by watching the entirety of this video. Also, thank you for watching though. But also, yeah, man, go watch it now. What are you waiting for? Come on, pop up Hulu or freaking Disney Plus and watch it. Give it the support it deserves, because my gosh, it deserves it, man. Now, let's just hope that Predator Badlands will maintain the momentum set up by Killer of Killers. But anyways, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Are you excited to see it? Have you already seen it? If you did, what did you think of it? Did you love it like I did? Did you hate it? Did it make things worse for you? Or are you feeling even worse about the franchise now and it didn't give you hope at all? Let me know what you guys think, whatever they may be. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless you all, and stay tuned if you would like to see more videos. Peace out, fellow moviegoers.